Hello, my friends. Welcome to DC Doom, the series where I try to watch every single movie based on DC characters, every single television series based on DC characters as well. And yesterday I watched one of the biggest flops of the 1980s, 1987's Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. And I think a lot of people, especially at the time, a movie comes out and it's not successful, often people judge it really harshly, like, oh, it's a bad movie because it didn't make any money. And by no stretch of the imagination is Superman 4 a good movie, but in the kind of like, I don't know, the series of Superman films starring Christopher Reeve, it's not the worst. I think Superman 3 is the worst because it doesn't understand Superman, and there's many reasons why I think Superman 3 is one of the worst Superman movies and perhaps one of the worst movies of all time, but we're talking about Superman 4. So Superman 4, I think, really understands in a better way the interaction between Christopher Reeve's portrayal of Clark Kent and Superman and Margot Kidder's portrayal of Lois Lane. Although the story is hampered a lot by what happened in the previous two movies, because if you don't remember, uh, Superman basically zaps Lois's brain at the end of Superman 2, which was completely uncharacteristic for Superman, in my opinion, and just shows that this whole franchise, this Christopher Reeves version of Superman, um, they don't understand the character very much. And all of the nostalgia that we feel towards the betrayal is all about the relationship between Reeve and Kidder. They had like an incredible chemistry. But yeah, so anyway, in this movie, Superman 4, Lois and Clark have kind of fallen into this sort of friendship thing where Lois clearly is in love with Superman and Superman seems to reciprocate, but Clark is treating Superman as a different character, so he's like dating somebody else at the same time. It doesn't make any sense. And then there's like this one moment where Lois remembers everything, so they have a conversation with Superman and Lois have a conversation, and Superman kisses her, and she forgets again everything. So the movie is suggesting that Superman has this power to give people amnesia, right? Especially Lois. So why would you date anybody else ever? Right? Because in other movies, he's seen dating a lot of other people. Maybe not a lot, like two or three other people. So if that's the thing that could happen to everybody you date, don't date anybody. That makes sense. I don't think that that decision makes sense for the character of Superman, though, and the character of Clark, because one of the big things in Superman mythology and Superman mythos is the relationship between Clark and Lois, and the triangle between Clark and Lois and Superman. And I think a better movie would be able to portray that triangle in a much more interesting way. And I keep falling back to the fact that Lois is one of the best investigative reporters of all time. And that's not just from this version of Superman, that is baked into the character of Lois Lane. If you read the comics from the 40s and 50s, Lois Lane is one of the best reporters on the planet. So she is going to figure out, always, she's going to figure out Clark's secret, right? And then a better movie would have it like all right, so I love Superman, but am I just idealizing him? But Clark, like I would have her fall in love with both of these separate characters and then slowly realize that they're the same person. And there might even be a great moment where Lois confronts Superman because Superman has feet of clay. He's not perfect, right? He's really, really good, but he's not perfect. So that would be a great moment where Lois is really ripping into Superman, and Superman and Clark, because it's the same person, are thinking, "Oh my God, she hates me! Oh no!" That would be perfect. And then she goes and she turns to Clark when Clark eventually arrives and tells him how much she loves him, and that would be great. And I don't think that they're going to make a movie like that right now because Superman is off on his own, a different trajectory. But I just imagine this movie with Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve. Like Superman 3 could have been that movie. That would have been a great movie, but alas, it doesn't exist. So this movie, though, as I said, it has those moments, and there's a moment where Clark is sick because Superman has fought Nuclear Man. Nuclear Man. I can't say the word properly. Write it in the comments. Criticize my pronunciation all you want. Um, so anyway, he's in a fight with the main villain of the piece, and he gets clawed, and he gets radiation poisoning, and then he's kind of dying, and Clark and Lois is saying all these things to him, and in a better movie, it would be the subtext would be clear that Lois is talking about him, Clark as well, not just Superman. But in this movie, she's specifically referring to Superman. But you can kind of interpret like she's talking to both of them. Maybe, maybe. Anyway, I mentioned Nuclear Man. Nuclear Man is the guy, the main villain of Superman 4. And the way that he is created is insane. So Lex Luthor steals some hair of Superman's, and he is going to use this to clone a guy who can fight against Superman, right? And he kind of cuts Superman's hair. I'm not sure how you could actually do that, but he cuts Superman's hair because it's on display at this museum. And he gets Superman's hair, and then he makes some protoplasmic goop, I guess, from the cells, and he puts the cells into this nuclear rocket because one part of the story is that Superman has decided that he's going to get rid of all of the nuclear weapons in the world, and because the Russia and the United States can't agree to any kind of compromises. So he throws all of the nuclear weapons into the sun, and then later he forgets one conveniently for the plot, and Lex Luthor manages to put his protoplasmic goo in the missile, and Superman throws the missile into space and it blows up, and it creates Nuclear Man. And it's not a bad idea for a villain, because what you want in Superman is you want someone who can actually hurt him or hurt the people that he loves. So it's not a bad take on a Superman villain character, but it really doesn't make any sense. So the character is fully formed in space, has all of these powers, doesn't freak out, goes to Lex Luthor and has Lex Luthor's voice for some reason, although it's kind of it hints at what's his name? Oh, I forgot the character, but in the comics and in many iterations of the different Superman media, Lex Luthor creates a clone of Superman, and he uses his own DNA. So I'm not sure he actually does this in this movie, or maybe I wasn't paying attention because I got bored. But anyway, Nuclear Man has Lex Luthor's voice, which is really, really weird. And he, for whatever reason, he comes and then he's threatening to Lex Luthor in the beginning, but then at the end, he does exactly what Lex Luthor wants. because Lex Luthor knows his weakness, which is darkness, which is crazy. I mean, I think the plot makes, I mean, the fact that he's like a fully formed man in space and he doesn't freak out doesn't make any sense. But on the level of Lex Luthor plots in the reverse, let's say, it makes perfect sense. It's that kind of level of Lex Luthor plots. The one thing that they're missing, though, is um, Lex Luthor's incompetence. Like he says he's the greatest criminal mind of his generation, but there's always some problem in all of his plots. And this one, the problem is just Superman. But I think it would be good if Nuclear Man turned on Lex Luthor, because that's what happens to Lex Luthor in these plots. Like Zod and the Kryptonians turned on him. Why wouldn't Nuclear Man turn on him? It would make a lot more sense. It would make this movie make a lot more sense. So yeah, the music is good. The acting is passable. Some of the story elements don't quite make sense, like the birth of Nuclear Man, but the fact that Superman is kind of disarming the world, and then there's that question about how he can interfere on Earth as basically a god on Earth. Does he have the right to do that? And so that's an interesting aspect of the story, and that's actually why Christopher Reeve returned to the franchise, because after three was a complete failure, and he said that he wouldn't come back unless he would have limited creative control over the story, and this is the story that he came up with. Um, and a lot of the acting is great because it has, as I said, Gene Hackman is back in his portrayal as Lex Luthor, and he's not as brilliant as the first two movies, but he's Gene Hackman. He's still pretty good. Same thing with Christopher Reeve. Not as brilliant as movies before, but still really good. And Margot Kidder was completely sidelined in the third movie. She was given like a couple of lines, and then she's basically a co-star again in this movie. So really, really good. And the reason that Kidder and Hackman were not in number three is because they were really pissed off that Richard Donner got fired from the first two movies. So they were in they filmed both movies at the same time, and they were about 75% done of filming the second one. And then the production company just fired the director. And the actors were like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So Kidder and Hackman were really, really upset. And Christopher Reeve was kind of trapped because he signed this contract that he would play Superman. So he had to be number three. And they tried to do something different with Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor does a good job in that movie, but like, it doesn't make any sense. The movie is like wild, 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 wild. And even though number three is worse than number four is just boring, you know? And one of the reasons it's boring is because while the acting is good, um, the special effects were bad by 1987 standards. And the reason that happened is also another interesting story. So, the original production company that had the rights to the Superman movie franchise, they made number three, they made number one, number two, and number three, and they tried to make Supergirl a thing, and I'm kind of in the middle of watching that, so I'm going to reserve my judgment on Supergirl. I'm not quite done, although it does have a lot of charm. About an hour in, it's kind of charming. But it was a flop because I think maybe there was a bit of Superman fatigue after three movies and only one was really good. Four movies and one clearly was good, but I think also maybe the movie going public in 1984 was not really ready for Supergirl, because I like Supergirl and I think she's an interesting character because for many, many reasons, but we're not going to talk about Supergirl because this is not a Supergirl review. Uh, yeah, so anyway, the movie flopped, and the production company sold the rights to the Superman movie franchise to a group called Canon Films. And Canon Films kind of convinced Reeve to come back as Superman to make a sequel. And Reeve was like, great, we can make a sequel that's better than 3. And it kind of reestablished the legacy of Superman. So he was all on board, and they started to make the movie when the film company went bankrupt, right in the middle of filming. So they had no budget for the rest of the movie. And some of the special effects are really, really basic kind of things, and the flying doesn't look good. And I didn't notice this, but some people say that you can see the wires. So that's why the movie doesn't really rise above goodness to goodness. It's not bad. It's like maybe a mediocre film. But I would say it kind of has a special place in my heart because I think it was a step in the right direction of that early Superman franchise, understanding the dynamic between Lois and Clark. But yeah, what do you think? What do you think about Superman? Number 4, Quest for Peace, starring Nuclear Man and Lois and Clark and Lex. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. If you like what I do or you want to criticize my pronunciation, put your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you want to really like what I do, please subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 20 subscribers by the end of June, and we're at 18, so I think it's doable. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.